but there's something appropriate about using electronic media for my topic, the title of which is Neural Circuitry, Information Transfer, and the Arts of Literature and in Performance. If you're using Apple earbuds to listen to this, I am dealing directly with your brain, which is much of the topic that I am about to discuss. I begin with two epigraphs. One is the very famous one from Virginia Woolf, that on or about 1910, human character changed. Woolf was addressing the fairly new art exhibit which opened in London at that time, which was an exhibit of post-impressionist art. And her comment refers to the kind of impact such an exhibit that altered human perception, how that had an effect on the human character. I pick up the theme with my own comment that on or about 2010, the human, a soft machine, changed. That is a general reference to the introduction of artificial intelligence into our everyday life. And since 2010, its growth has become impossible to avoid, affecting every bit of our lives. So the general title here is Neural Circuitry, Information Transfer, and the Arts of Literature and or in Performance. The first section is from Character to Circuit. The essay examines how information is generated, transmitted, and received across neural, linguistic, and performative systems, arguing that literature and performance operate as electroneuromatic processes that act directly on bodies, nervous systems, and distributed technological networks. Drawing on neuroscience, media theory, philosophy of language, and performance studies, it traces a continuum from codified gestures and speech acts to neural spikes, archives, and electronic media. Through case studies ranging from early modern gestures to William S. Burroughs, Marshall McLuhan, and Samuel Beckett, the essay proposes a model of art as a form of neural event rather than symbolic representation alone. Virginia Woolf's oft-cited remark about the transformation of human character around 1910 has long served as a shorthand for modernism's reconfiguration of subjectivity, perception, and narrative form. A century later, my own revision, The Human as Soft Machine Changed, registers a parallel shift, not merely in literary character, but in the very neurological, technological, and informational conditions under which meaning is produced, transmitted, and received. Between Virginia Woolf's psychological modernism and Gontarski's postmodern inflection lies a growing recognition that art, especially literature and performance, is inseparable from the neural circuitry and information systems that underwrite cognition, sensation, and affect. This essay develops an interdisciplinary account of information transfer that moves from language and gesture to neural spikes, archive, and electronic media. It argues that literature and performance operate not only as symbolic systems addressed to interpretation, but as neuromatic processes that act directly on bodies, nervous systems, and distributed networks of human and non-human agents. Next section, language, gesture, and codified movement. At the most basic level, understood as instruction, plans, emotions, or data, information travels through language, an abstract, arbitrary, and symbolic system transmitted by sound, inscription, or gesture. Yet language has never been confined to spoken or written words. Gesture constitutes an equally sophisticated semiotic system. In classical Greece, chironomia designated a codified rhetoric of bodily movement, an alphabet of gestures depicted on ceramic vessels and embedded in ritual and performance. Early modern theater, essentially Shakespeare's period, inherited and elaborated this gestural grammar. John Bulwer's book, Chronologia of 1644, for instance, systematized what he called, quote, the natural language of the hand, offering a lexicon of bodily signs whose meanings were at once conventional and content dependent. As John Wesley has shown further, gestures on the Shakespearean stage were polyvalent rather than fixed, operating within a rhetoric that allowed for ambiguity and layered signification. Gesture, Wesley argued, functioned as a performative system with its own grammar, capable of shaping audience response independently of spoken dialogue. This emphasis as embodied sign system anticipates later theatrical theories. Bertolt Brecht's concept of gestus similarly framed movement as a social and ideological inscription, while 20th century semiotics provided tools for analyzing how nonverbal signs produce meaning. Across these traditions, the body emerges as a primary medium of information transfer. Next section, speech act, context, and action. Philosophical accounts of language in the 20th century reinforced this performative dimension. J.L. Austin's theory of speech acts demonstrate that utterances do not merely describe reality, but can enact it. John Searle extended this insight by distinguishing between sentences as abstract structures and utterances as context-bound acts imbued with intention. Meaning, in this view, is not contained in words alone, but arises from the deployment within specific situations. Yet, linguistic philosophy, powerful as it is, stops short of explaining how stimuli, linguistic or otherwise, are translated into movement, sensation, or comprehension. How does a spoken line become a stage gesture? How does rhythm, pace, or tone produce affect in an audience? To address these questions, we must turn from semiotics and philosophy to neuroscience. So we pick up neural circuitry and information flow. The human brain, weighing roughly 3 pounds and comprising approximately 86 billion neurons constitutes one of the most complex information processing systems known. Each neuron communicates with others through synapses, whose number is currently estimated at around 150 million. These synaptic connections allow for bidirectional communication via chemical and electrical signals, enabling everything from involuntary bodily functions to abstract thought and artistic creation. Despite advances in brain mapping, and most notably, the complete mapping of the fruit fly brain, human neural circuitry remains only partially understood. The removal and preservation of Albert Einstein's brain in 1955 exemplifies both the fascination with and the limitations of anatomical approaches to genius in this case. As Marina Bentivoglio notes, the quest for, quote, an anatomy of genius raises enduring philosophical questions about the relationship between brain structure and the intangible phenomena of mind and consciousness. Genius, creativity, and meaning cannot be fully localized in tissue alone. They emerge from dynamic networks that extend beyond the skull. Archives, control systems, and the soft machine, a term coined by William S. Burroughs for the human body. Few writers explored the extended model of cognition more provocatively than William S. Burroughs. Described by Professor of Art History at Florida State University, Francois Boucher, as possessing an elite brain that functioned as a recorder or archive. Burroughs conceived of reality as a tape loop running through the human body, the soft machine, and regulated by external control systems. His cut-up technique, developed with artist Brian Geisen and sound technician Ian Somerville, literalized this metaphor by treating language as manipulable data subject to recombination. John Lardus Modern observed that Burroughs' work posits reality itself as a reel-to-reel tape produced by intersecting systems of power, addiction, and information. Although the specific reel-to-reel technology has become obsolete, the underlying insight remains prescient. Human consciousness operates within cybernetic feedback loops that integrate biological and media systems, social and technological networks. Burroughs' resistance to these systems, his attempts to break through or reprogram the tape, anticipates contemporary anxieties about algorithmic control and data saturation. On to McLuhan, neuromatics, and the electronic age. Marshall McLuhan provided a theoretical framework for understanding such integrations. For McLuhan, electronic media are extensions of the central nervous system, producing, quote, a global village in which private and public boundaries collapse. In his reading of Naked Lunch, William S. Burroughs' masterwork, McLuhan argues that Burroughs documents the hazards and processes of an electronic environment in which the nervous system itself becomes programmable. Although McLuhan was not a neuroscientist, his intuitions that media reshape neural processes resonates with contemporary research on neural plasticity and distributed cognition. Mark Humphreys works on neural spikes, and he emphasizes that electrical impulses underpin not only perception and movement, but also memory, creativity, and decision-making. Communication between neurons can occur not only through synapses, but via ephaptic coupling, electrical interactions that leap across small gaps, suggesting a biological basis for what McLuhan metaphorically describes as semi-telepathic systems. Consciousness and the return of the subject. For much of the 20th century, consciousness was considered an unsuitable subject for scientific study. That changed decisively with Francis Crick and Christoph Koch's 1990 proposal for a neurobiological theory of consciousness. Their work reframed subjective experience, what it feels like to be alive, as a legitimate target of empirical investigation. Subsequent research, as Colin Hayes and Marissa Erickson note, has integrated neuroscience with physics to explore how electromagnetic processes may bridge the explanatory gap between brain activity and phenomenal consciousness. These developments recontextualize artistic practice. If consciousness is an emergent property of neural and electromagnetic systems, then art that acts directly on sensation and affect engages the nervous system at a fundamental level. Literature and performance become experiences in consciousness modulation. Getting to Beckett and neuromatic theory. Samuel Beckett's late theater exemplifies such an approach. When Beckett insisted that not I should, quote, work on the nerves of the audience, not its intellect, he articulated a neuromatic theory of performance. The rapid, disembodied speech of mouth bypasses conventional comprehension, producing an affective assault that registers physically before it is processed cognitively. Beckett's fascination with Albrecht Dürer's drawings further underscores this emphasis on arrested movement and spectral presences. In plays such as Footfalls, A. Joe, figures hover between materiality and absence, light and voice, substituting for fully embodied characters. As Gilles Deleuze argues in an essay called The Exhausted, these images are not representational, but processes, becomings that generate affect through their very instability. In Beckett's theater, meaning does not reside in narrative resolution or psychological depth, but in the immediate impact of rhythm, repetition, and sensory intensity. Such work aligns with a neuromatic model in which art functions as a circuit, transmitting signals across bodies and media rather than conveying messages to be decoded. Experimental performance art and participatory ecology, and here I focus on a group called Blast Theory, and they consider themselves media poets. Experimental performance art has always pushed against the boundaries of what an artwork can be, but in the hands of media poets like the UK collective Blast theory, the form becomes something even more radical, a lived system of interactions where audiences are not merely observers, but co-authors. Their work determines how performance can evolve into an immersive, participatory ecology shared by technology, social dynamics, and the unpredictable agency of the public. Experimental performance art prioritizes experience over representation. Instead of presenting a fixed narrative or aesthetic object, it constructs situations in which meaning emerges through participation. These works often blur distinctions between performer and spectator, art and life, physical and digital space. The result is a form that is less about watching and more about doing, feeling, and negotiating. This shift aligns with broader cultural movements toward interactivity and immersion. As digital technologies reshape how people communicate, play, and navigate the world, experimental performance art becomes a laboratory for exploring these transformations. Blast theory exemplifies this approach, led by Matt Adams and Nick Tandavici. The group draws on popular culture and new technology to create performances, games, films, apps, and installations that take place in public at the center of unusual, often unsettling experiences. Their work explores social and political questions through interactive systems that invite audiences to make choices, take risks, and confront their own assumptions. Their practice spans decades and includes collaborations with researchers and scientists, particularly through their long-standing partnership with Mixed Reality Lab at the University of Nottingham. This relationship has allowed them to integrate cutting-edge technological experimentation with artistic inquiry in works that are both conceptual and rigorous and technically innovative. One of the defining features of Blast Theory's work is its use of interactivity not as a gimmick, but as a structural principle. Their productions, part game, part installation, part performance, enmesh participants within complex systems where their decisions shape the unfolding experience. Spectators become collaborators, and the artwork becomes a dynamic process rather than a static object. Scholars have described this as an aesthetics of emergence in which meaning arises from the interplay of media, environment, and participant agency. Blast Theory's innovative environments immerse audiences while simultaneously encouraging reflection, creating a dual state of action and awareness. Blast Theory's use of technology is never purely technical, it is always social. Mobile devices, GPS tracking, live video feeds, and online platforms become tools for exploring questions of surveillance, trust, intimacy, and power. Their work often places participants in ethically charged situations that reveal how digital systems shape human behavior. By drawing on popular culture, reality TV, gaming, online classrooms, they tap into familiar forms while subverting them. The result is a kind of media poetry, a hybrid language of performance, technology that speaks to contemporary life. They create spaces of possibility. Experiential performance art in the hands of groups like Blast Theory opens new possibilities for how art can function in a society, as in, one, exposes hidden systems, technological, political, social, by making them experiential. Two, fosters empathy and connection through shared participatory encounters. Three, encourages critical reflection by placing audiences in active decision-making roles. And four, expanding artistic authorship to include the unpredictable contributions of the public. Blast Theory's work demonstrates that experiential performance art is not just about immersion, it's about agency, responsibility, and the creation of new forms of collective meaning. In an era defined by digital interactivity and mediated experience, experiential performance art offers a powerful way to explore how we live, communicate, and imagine together. Blast Theory, as media poets, craft environments where technology becomes a medium for human encounters and transformation. Their work invites us not only to witness, but to participate, to question, to co-create. Through this, they expand the very definition of performance and remind us that art can be a space where new forms of experience and new ways of being emerge. In conclusion, we're willing to declare art as an electro-neural event. From ancient gesture systems to digital archives, from neural spikes to electronic media, the arts of literature and performance operate within complex circuits of information transfer. These circuits are at once biological, technological, and cultural. To understand them requires moving beyond purely interpretive models toward an account of art as an event that unfolds across electro-nervous systems and other networks. In this sense, literature and performance art do not merely reflect changes in human character, they participate in the ongoing reconfiguration of the human as a soft machine embedded in electroneuromatic environments. Art becomes not a representation of consciousness, but one of its active conditions. Anyway, thank you very much. As I offer some thoughts for further exploration. Thank you.